Welcome to the new normal in college football, a normal in which Vanderbilt, Georgia Tech, and Virginia are contenders, a normal in which if your coach is not getting it done, he has to be moved on from, even if it's in the middle of the season. This is the College Game Day Podcast. We've just passed the third Saturday in October. We're headed for the final Saturday in October. October is when you set yourself up to win championships. November is when you claim them and claim playoff spots. And if you are not in that mix, then you have to make a move on your coach, or so it seems. Rece Davis, Pete Thamel, and Dan Wetzel, the highly anticipated and, frankly, major content producer of this podcast over the last couple of years, Billy Napier, came to an end. The Bull Gators came out. They had been patient. They had waited, and Billy Napier had done his Rasputin act for a number of times, meaning had avoided assassination, figuratively speaking, of course, coaching ending his tenure at Florida. And they finally got him yesterday. My wife texted me, Pete, and said, can't they ever do these things someday other than Sunday? I said, welcome to Pete Thamel's world, where Sunday is the day that coaches get whacked. And Billy Napier finds himself in a rare position among fired Florida bosses. Now, outside of Steve Spurrier, no one has sustained excellence at Florida. What about Urban Meyer? 6 years. It was a comet, man, and it was awesome for the Gators, but no one has sustained it other than Stephen or Spurrier. And so the Gators go through this cycle, and Pete, for the second time in 6 years, they're paying three guys. With buyouts. Once they hire the new coach, it will be the buyout, the previous coach, and whoever they hire for the new coach. And so they're going to churn it all over, drag another one to the bottom of the swamp, and see if they can come up with a winner this time.
Yeah, it's coaches get fired on Sundays. That is Kate Thamel's enduring quote that has resonated particularly hard this year. We didn't have any firings, Rece, until week 8 last year, which is when Mike Houston and Will Hall were fired, the esteemed coaches.
Did we do an emergency podcast on that or not?
We did not do an emergency podcast on that. So. We did not. I would have probably held family pictures knowing those were happening that day, but family pictures got canceled on Sunday. So we're going to operate from this week in the doghouse here in the Thamel house and push and push on. So Florida is
oh boy.
Wow. Yeah, hold on.
Oh, wait. I look, this is evergreen content with coaches firing. Dan, I think this seems like fastball middleman to you.
Married guys. Yeah, veteran married guys here. Ouch. Oh, man. That means the dress was already dry cleaned. The kid's hair was cut, right? Oh no, Rece. Yeah.
It was an anticipatory cancellation on Friday, right, which might have been not as bad. It was not in the it was not in the moment.
Right,
there was a strong sense this was coming. We're rescheduled for Tuesday, so by the time some people are listening to this, young Tegan Thamel will have her professional family portraits with the rest of the crew. But it was. Sundays can be tough. Sundays can be tough. The carousel waits for no one, gentlemen. It waits for no one. Especially this year, we are 10 jobs in already, whereas in week 8 last year we had our first 2. So last year, I think, guys, where we were in a moment of rev shares coming. What's it going to look like? NIL, all the uncertainties were hovering, and we only had 3 Power 5 in-season firings, and those were at North Carolina, Purdue, and West Virginia, which won't be mistaken for anyone's blue blood jobs. Now that people have a feel for the landscape, and certainly nobody's got it figured out, we see the reverberation of that back, and we all of a sudden have seen a flurry of these jobs opening. And we'll dive into Florida more a little bit later, but it's just to the point of who's going to fill them. Are people now going to not fire their coach because of that? We got Florida State's lost 9 straight ACC games, right? So that automatically, anyone who loses 9 straight conference games is in danger of losing their job.
Yeah,
Hugh Freeze is 0-4. Go ahead, Rece.
No, I just wanted to point out one thing before you move from Florida State. I mentioned on Game Day Saturday that it had been more than a calendar year since Florida State had won an ACC game. There was someone on one of the social media. I wish I had been more aware of Mike Norvell's birthday because Mike Norvell is now 44 years old. When Florida State last won an ACC game, he was 42 years old, which means clearly that he is violating the principle of letting people know his wishes when he blows out his candles on his birthday cake, because they are not coming true. I mean, they lost again. I digress. I was afraid I would forget that. Please continue on, Senator Thamel.
There's a stat, man.
That is a
that one hurts.
But once a week I run across, like, this is a Rece Davis stat, and I just screenshot it and send it to him, or if it's dug up. So anyway, we're not even on the precipice. We're in the throes of what will be the most active coaching carousel in the history of college football. Just with what is open, what could open, and then the potential ripples from these jobs. And obviously, to have a big coaching market, you need market drivers. And when you have Penn State and you have Florida, those are two massive market drivers. And then there could be two or three other, and I think of market drivers as like national championship caliber programs, right? Auburn's won one this century. Obviously, Freeze is 0-4. He's been dealing with some health issues. It's just hard to see the notoriously disciplined Auburn brass riding through that one. And then Florida State. Look, it's been 9 straight games. Mike Norvell's, it's that fall. It to me is going to be like when they write the book on modern college football and the just violent changes from year to year and how one year has nothing to do with the next. It's like you almost set up like the lead at Indiana and then you set up the foil at Florida State, right? Guy was 13-0. He was 13-0, quarterback injury away from the playoff, rolling dudes. They were kind of ahead of the time in the portal. Remember, they got Jared Verse. They were, they were, and then it is just not worked for them on the field. And it seems as if the reshuffle hasn't worked. They've obviously been, remember the bobble against Virginia? I've never seen a 10-yard bobble ever, never mind a 10-yard bobble to determine a game. And then they have the goal line, bang, bang, Gavin Sawchuk, shovel pass that ultimately determines that game at about 2:32 Eastern on Saturday night. It's been a wild ride there. But anyway, let's start on Florida, Dan.
Fire everybody. I think there's 2 coaches that people like right now. Well, maybe 3. Kalen DeBoer is doing pretty good right now, but they wanted to fire him last month. The only 2 are Cignetti and Ryan Day, and they wanted to fire Ryan Day last November. So it's just Cignetti's world. I mean, I'm going to go back and slightly repeat what I said last week. We are in this weird spot in college football between 2 eras of the sport. And you have schools that think we should never lose. We should never play tight. We should never be close. We are a 9-10 win program, and then we should win national titles. And then you have this era of the sport where everybody's pretty good. And Florida State's on the wrong side of 2 extremely tight calls, right? Very close. I think they got them both right. I think Florida State lost both those games, but very close, right? I looked at the stat the other night, like Arkansas, right? No one's talking. Sam Pittman lost his job. They've lost by 1 point to Memphis. They lost by 3 to Texas A&M. They lost to 3 to Ole Miss, and they lost by 6 to somebody. I don't know, whatever. They have 4 losses inside a touchdown. No one's sitting there saying Arkansas is any good. Well, they could be. Now they got killed by Notre Dame, but whatever. Like, everything is so close in the sport now. But you have these 2 things where it's like, well, we should win all these games, but it doesn't work that way anymore. Anybody can beat anybody almost. And then you have all these boosters that, because the college sports establishment did not set up revenue share early or face the realities of how these lawsuits were going to go, have had to lean on their boosters. And, there's an old saying, like, are you committed? Are you involved? Or are you committed? And it's like the bacon and egg breakfast, right? The chicken is involved. The pig is committed. The pig's all the way in. And these boosters now, they're the pigs. If you donated $100,000, you donated $1 million, you bought that player, you went to these guys and said, you're basically ownership. Or you just gave $10,000 or $5,000, but that's all you had. It's more than you probably had, right? You want results. You feel like an owner. So fire them all. And I'm not saying any of these decisions are wrong. It's just we're stuck in this spot where there's no patience because of old thinking, and there's no patience because everyone's committed, not just involved. And then you have the reality of how the heck do we know? Arizona State looked awful last week. This week, they're storming the field, right? I don't know. Anything can happen in this sport. So these firings, and yet, as Pete said, this will be the amount of money that will be committed to these places. Everyone's getting a new deal. And everyone's going to fall for the same mistake of they guaranteed Cignetti $93 million. I love Kirk Cignetti, but he's a 64-year-old coach who's coached a season and a half, and you just guaranteed him, I think, $93 million. Like that's the market force we got here. I don't think that's a great business strategy right there. Now, if you're Indiana football, you're like, this is our only chance. Hope it works out. But this is where we're at with these deals. These buyouts are massive. I heard over the weekend, people were like, well, Napier's only $21 million. Okay. $21 million. It's your entire revenue share to all your players. So it is mayhem, and everyone's going to get a raise. There aren't enough good coaches to go down. If you can cobble together 9 wins in the MAC or the Sun Belt, you're getting a deal. I mean, there's just too many. Florida State, Auburn, Wisconsin. Who knows how many other ones are going to still open. This is going to be wild. Pete, no schedule, free Sundays the rest of the
year. Can you imagine, Dan, you just mentioned, only 21 million. It wasn't that long ago that I think that was roughly the figure that Auburn set the record, sending Gus Malzahn on his way. And of course, then Jimbo Fisher got paid. There are a couple of things that, as you were talking, that popped into my mind. One, I'm a big fan of Curt Cignetti. I think Indiana did the right thing. I think he's going to continue to win. That said, major challenge coming next year, when a lot of that core that knew how to win, that had been undervalued and brilliantly developed by Curt and his staff, came from James Madison, went to Indiana, they move on. Big challenge coming up. If Mendoza, moves on, big challenge. Do I think he'll reach that challenge? Sure, I do. But he has now created an expectation and raised the level to the point that Indiana fans are going to get mad if there's a step back. It's much like what Nick Saban talked about with James Franklin when he was on our set, that while Penn State certainly has a history and tradition of expectations, when James arrived there because of the dire straits that Penn State was in at the time, he created a different set of expectations. And the other thing that came to mind in this constant churn of coaches, there aren't good enough coaches. You know who's a really, really good coach? Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen's a really good coach. What Dan Mullen didn't like doing, apparently, or was not successful enough doing, was recruiting. Florida wanted to recruit like everyone else. It's easy to say now, as the legendary Pat Dye used to say sometimes at the news conferences I went to in the late 80s and early 90s when I was working local, hindsight is 50-50. But hindsight can be 20-20 in this regard. If you had been forward-thinking enough in this era of revenue sharing, getting money from the boosters, talent acquisition through a lot of players, the wise thing for Florida, easy for me to say, a few years later, 5 years later, the wise thing for Florida would have been to say, okay, Dan, we're not cutting it in recruiting, but you're an excellent day of game coach. You're an excellent game plan kind of guy. We've got to do better recruiting. So here's what we're going to do. Instead of paying you money for a buyout, we're going to put this front office in place. You're certainly going to have a say in the front office, but we are going to ramp up talent acquisition for you. You're still going to have to be involved in recruiting. You'll still have to close some deals, but talent acquisition is going to fall under the purview of this person, this department. We're going to find the best person, and you keep the coach. What does that sound like? Oh, that sounds a lot like the NFL. And I think that's where we are. Florida would have been wise to do that. I think a lot of these schools, if they have confidence in their coach's ability to lead and get them to play hard, that's what they should do. because that's the number one thing. I have enormous respect for the guys, all of the guys in these jobs, ability to take their O's and beat your X's or vice versa. All of them can come up with schemes. Can you get them to play hard consistently, play to a standard, play with passion and energy? That's where leadership and motivational skills come into play. If you have that, give him the other stuff around them. Give him the XO guy, which is a failing of Billy Napier's. He's a good offensive coach. He needed an offensive coordinator. He didn't do it, and it ended up being among the things that came back to get him.
Who do we think Florida hires, guys? I think there's not much to say about Napier.
I know who they want to hire. We all know who they want to hire.
It was pretty apparent this was going to happen, right? I don't think an autopsy of Billy Napier is necessary. It's sort of been happening for the last year as he was going to be fired, got saved, played well for a little, and then it reminded me a little bit of the same movie. Remember Scott Frost wrote his own obituary at Nebraska? He said, I thought that was the best summation. He's like, yeah, our fans are seeing the same movie every week. And for Napier, it was that. It was goofy penalties. It was spitting in the face. It was 2 number 3s on the field. It was just it just wasn't working. And this was expected and where it is. Well, let me ask this. We can talk about who they're going to get. Let me ask this. How good of a job is Florida? So since Urban Meyer, we've had Will Muschamp, we've had Jim McElwain, we've had Dan Mullen, we've had Billy Napier. Some were good, none were great. Some had great moments, but no one was dominant there. Nobody won an SEC. A couple SEC title games appearances. Mullen and McElwain for sure. Muschamp maybe. Did Muschamp make a title game?
I think I'd have to look to confirm to make sure. I think McElwain went twice. Yes. Mullen went once, I think. And
2020 for sure.
2020 went for sure. I think McElwain went twice.
Yeah. How good of a job is the University of Florida in the modern landscape?
I think all the jobs can be good. I think it's a little different calculus than it was before. It's certainly been the odd thing, and Spurrier's talked about this. Do you see what it was before I got there? Urban did do 6 years. It was really a 5-year sprint because that last year, he almost quit. I think he did quit for a day. I think Pete had that story. Quit for a day and then came back. But for the most part, for some reason, they've not been that great. But my thing with any of these jobs is if your school, anybody can get good. Look at Vanderbilt, right? Anybody can get good. Indiana, Virginia, there's a whole bunch of schools out there that they're doing it. Florida certainly has that ability to have those players. And I think they get an added bonus. It's not that every team is dead equal the way it might be in the NFL or as close to dead equal as you can get, but you get the added bonus of having proximity to talent and proximity to a great in-state recruiting base and things like that, which still can help you a great deal. So I think Florida, there's no reason that any school, and this is sort of the problem, can't sit there and say, yeah, we should contend for a national title. And certainly Florida should, considering how many they've won before. Is if you sit there and look at these top 10 rankings right now, and you see a bunch of schools that, there's Indiana, there's A&M. Oh, they could never do it. Oh, there they are. Georgia Tech. Absolutely. But the question is, can you get everything organized? Can you get the right guy? It's a different skill set, to Rece's point, than maybe what you had before. And I don't exactly know what that skill set is. If it was, I'd set up a consulting firm and make those guys make bank. Those are good jobs. But in the past, you'd sit there and say, okay, we're Florida. Let's go see if we can get Lane Kiffin or Eli Drinkwitz to leave, schools in our league that aren't quite at the level, that have never won a national title. Or let's say maybe we go get Alex Golish at South Florida, someone with some recruiting ties, the locals know us. I don't know if either of those things are necessary. I don't know that Lane or Drink would leave because they can do it at their place. Maybe not. It's not as simple as a jump. And I don't know that you sit there and say, boy, I need someone who's doing it local at the mid-major level. It's just such a skill set that you're looking for. And that's going to be the challenge. But I think Florida, almost any school can make playoffs at this point. And that's both the interesting part and the scary part for places like UF.
I agree, Dan. Anybody can make the playoff. I do think that there are relatively few places where you can establish a dynasty. Florida is one of them, but you also have to acknowledge the fact that it has been extraordinarily difficult. So why is that? They've always had great players in the state of Florida. I mean, dating back to the days of Bear Bryant. Bear Bryant once said famously, if Florida could ever find the right guy, they'd be the giant in the SEC. That was a different era. They'd never won anything. It'd never been any good until SOS got there, Stephen Orr Spurrier. Then they became a juggernaut. Now they think it's their birthright. And the other thing that Spurrier did was you have to win a certain way at Florida because they didn't love the way McElwain won. Muschamp didn't go to the SEC championship game, I don't believe, but he did go to a Sugar Bowl. They won 11 games. They didn't like the way he won, and then ultimately he didn't win enough. So when you go to Florida, you've got to win a certain way in addition to that, or they get upset with you. That was one of the reasons that Billy Napier, even offensive-minded guy that he was, it was always still kind of a power run kind of thing at Louisiana. It was not high-flying, trickeration of Urban Meyer or cutting-edge passing game of Steve Spurrier. They didn't like the way you won. So at Florida, you can establish a dynasty, but apparently there are administrative and structural things that make it extraordinarily difficult to get things going, or else we wouldn't have this number of coaches who've taken this job only to be shown the door in a relatively short period of time. But it is a dynasty type of job. To your point about Drinkwitz and more specifically to Kiffin, Lane Kiffin, if he wins a championship at Ole Miss, they're going to build a statue to him. They're not far from doing it anyway. It would probably be in some type of hot yoga pose. But they're going to build a statue to him if he wins a championship there. Because as great as Johnny Vaught was, only historians even know who that is. They don't know who that is. So Lane Kiffin is on the cusp of being the greatest coach, the most revered coach in Ole Miss history. But there are realities of this era of football that I ran across, Pete, and you are the perfect person to answer this. I saw a graphic that one of our competitors put out. I'm not going to say that makes it inaccurate, nor am I going to vouch for its accuracy. But it had Florida sort of middle of the pack in SEC payroll this year, and Ole Miss at the bottom or toward the bottom in terms of this year's payroll. That's a difference maker. I don't know if it's right. First of all, let's start there, Pete. Is that I see the look on your face. It looks like that's not right. And if it's not, then that would be the biggest draw of all, or the only reason I can think of to leave Ole Miss, because while you might not have Florida talent, there are good players in Mississippi. And where you're located, you can get them from Memphis and from Alabama and from Louisiana. And you can go into Florida and get players at Ole Miss. So the only question I would have would be payroll, because you're set up there to be a legend, and you are going to be third if you're lucky if you go to Florida. Now, like we talked about last week, do you have to go to Penn State? So once again, this falls into the same thing I said earlier. Depends on what you want. It depends on what you want. If you want to live in Florida and be part of that, okay, that's fine. If you want to be the man someplace, then you stay where you are. It depends on what you want. And, I think it does. So first of all, let's go back to that. Is that accurate? Where does Ole Miss, where does Missouri, just to use the two guys Dan brought up, where do they stack up relative to Florida in terms of being able to compensate players outside of revenue sharing?
Okay, so outside of revenue sharing.
I mean, everybody's the same revenue sharing. Yeah.
Yes. Well, kind of.
Well, roughly. Yes, they have access to the same thing, revenue sharing.
Yeah. It's really difficult to get concise numbers on, they call it sidecar NIL, right? So I would just say this philosophically. Ole Miss has been aggressive and generally excellent at providing football and men's basketball revenue for strong rosters. Ole Miss's roster last year was quite expensive and quite good. And I'm impressed because their roster this year does not have the same cut of talent that last year's did, but is playing better when it comes down to it. Now, the defense obviously didn't stop anybody in Athens on Saturday. They've generally been pretty good. And Ole Miss's thing has been you're not going to outpay us, right? Like we are not going to lose money battles. Now, just generally as a program and with resources and state and infrastructure and all that, should Florida end up having more sidecar NIL? Yes. Now, Florida's start to NIL and collectives was a mess. Remember Jaden Rashada? There were lawsuits, like the whole thing. Like they did not. Ole Miss's was a smashing linear success, and so there had been some muddling around by Florida in there, which hurt them in the past couple seasons. They're in a much better place there now with that. Now that things have sort of gone more conventional, above board, whatever you want to whatever you want to call it, but. In my mind, as I look at it, and I'm not like adding it, it's dangerous to like add it up, right? Like without really knowing. I don't think Florida is at this monster advantage in the current, but they should be. Does that make sense? Like there is more available there. They finally got the facility built, which was a big deal there. They basically won all those games under Urban, and Jeremy Foley at the end of his tenure got a little bit of sleep at the wheel and just didn't keep building. Just thought it's Florida, it's going to work. And again, he's an excellent athletic director, but that was a blind spot for him at the end, and that cost them going into an era still under Muschamp, under McElwain, under Mullen, where you did need the nice shiny facility to win recruiting battles, among other things. But that was still part of that was still part of it. So I still think Florida is a very good job, and some of it you're biased, right? I saw it alive and rocking. It's a campus that supports it. They just won the men's basketball title. You don't do that if you're not, supported there. So it needs to get aligned better. But it has been aligned. You do have I think they're on their second interim president right now, which is probably part of the reason why we didn't see them part ways with Billy Napier last year. There just was like a little bit of, administrative muddle there that led to that. So look, I still think Florida's a very good job. And I don't think you'd be hard pressed if you're at a traditional have-not in the SEC like Ole Miss or Missouri to pass on that job. I also want to add the name Jeff Brom to the mix. Like, talk about a guy who fits the ethos you were talking about, Rece, of yards, aggression, creativity, fun. Like, if you don't like watching Jeff Brom's teams play, how about those opening couple scripts against Miami, off a bye week, he's constantly innovating, and that's kind of part of when Florida was great. They had great offensive minds behind it. I think Rhett Lashley's name will linger around in this search. He's a possibility. He may stay because he's had a very good job and they're going to pay him whatever he wants. But he's certainly going to factor into a bunch of these jobs. And I think the name Jed Fish is going to be bandied around too, the Washington head coach. He's a Florida grad. He was famously Howie Roseman's roommate for 6 weeks their sophomore year. And Jed Fish came through there, student worker under Spurrier, not a player, and has had great success so far at Washington. So I think that's probably the list, right? Like if it doesn't come from that list, I think it'd be pretty surprising.
Didn't Jed famously be the first to laminate the HBC's ball plays so that it's going to rain, get ball plays wet? Jed figured. I think he claims to have left notes, Dan, on Spurrier's car. I've forgotten the exact number. Some absurd number of days in a row, like 400 days in a row or some such thing, to try to get involved.
Try to get hired. Yeah. All those would be good. And I agree with Pete. Like, I'm not saying the ceiling at Florida is considerable, right? And that's it. The Grove Collective at Ole Miss was almost everybody in the collective world. So that was just as good of a launch and as good of an operation as anyone has set up. But that said, there's more money in Florida, right? And this is the difference. Maybe I was talking last week about, so Indiana's got plenty of money. Indiana can get this whole thing going to a degree where I think it offsets the Penn State advantage over Indiana. And I think you saw that with Cignetti and the calendar and all that stuff. I do think Florida's got an advantage over Ole Miss and Missouri. It's just a little bit less of an advantage. The player transfer portal has altered the coaching transfer portal. And the way to get guys is just different. So it's going to be really interesting. But I don't think it's a no-brainer. But I think Florida is very focused on trying to get a proven Power 4 head coach. I thought Napier was a great hire at the time. I think it kind of spoke to the past way where you look around and say, okay, hey, this guy's killing the Sun Belt. Let's move him up. And that was a pretty traditional route to get a good head coach. And in this case, it just didn't work, right? It goes down to Sun Belt Billy. I don't even know what that means. I guess he just wasn't good enough in the SEC. But
the SEC.
Pete,
let me ask you this:
it's a tough go.
Is there alignment? I've got some hints as the answer to this, but I need official answers. Is there alignment in the pursuit of Lane Kiffin at Florida?
Can I tell a funny story first?
Yeah.
So Dan mentioned
only if you promise not to dodge the question and answer.
I won't dodge the question. I won't dodge the question. The Grove Collective is run by a guy named Walker Jones, who's an old character who's an agency aide.
Under Armour.
He's been around. Yeah. And I tell you the story because he said this in public in Washington, D.C. at one of these like stuffy things that all of us went to a couple summers ago. We're there. It was in that moment where transitioning to paying players in NIL, and it was all weird, and everybody's lobbying Congress. And he stands up and he says, "I played for Senator Tuberville at Ole Miss. I was the only player he didn't pay." And the whole room was just like, "What?"
That's the quiet part.
So
You're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to say that.
Yeah. That's the spirit of which the Grove Collective has been run. Yes. So I would say this about Lane Kiffin's candidacy at Florida. I think it's a very strong candidacy. I think whether it be administratively in the president's office, whether it be in the athletics office, Lane Kiffin is a divisive guy. So the performance is the performance, but Lane Kiffin constantly instigates brush fires, right? Like he has done it for 20 years. In fact, he really became an instigator by just hammering Urban Meyer when he was at Tennessee. You remember this? There was like a famous signing day where he said Meyer broke the rules. And then like he's just now Lane has calmed down and he does yoga and we all watch Ryan's special with him. But you are never going to be uniformly aligned with Lane Kiffin if you're an administration, because there is difficulty that comes with him. Now, I think Lane's a great coach, and I think he has grown and certainly matured from what we've seen. I do think it would be fun to see him at Florida because he would bring back that maverick kind of style that Spurrier brought, with his famous quips, and he would bring back. How about Lane, like kind of on the sly saying the Bush push is a really dumb play? Like that's vintage Lane, right? It was a stupid play. Yeah. I was, he is so good in that setting on our show. I don't care if he's at Ole Miss, Florida, or South Louisiana Mudhogs or whatever the name of that Bobby Boucher team was. He comes on the show. He's hilarious. Yes. I mean, him pointing out people in robes up above the spot where they were staying, talking about how Nick would get upset if this were happening. He brings attention. He's fun. He's smart. He's a terrific coach. I understand why anybody would want him as a coach. And I understand why Ole Miss will do everything it can to keep him. I understand both decisions. If he has the decision to make, I would understand staying and becoming a legend at Ole Miss, and I would understand, taking a shot at Florida. Just what happens if he makes the playoff?
Good. He's really good, so he's got options.
What happens if he makes the playoff?
That's the scheduling problem is a mess here, right? Like I don't. How do you leave? I don't know. That's going to be very, very challenging. I just want to go back to if you recall, this was peak Lane when he was at Tennessee. That you mentioned the fight at Pahokee High School. He got banned. He was banned from Pahokee High School. I believe the ban is over now, but he in the Tennessee. He basically said they were getting Newkeese Richardson, who was a big recruit, and he said that the Richardson family had to fax in. This was the faxing days, which went way too long. The NIL at a different school because he said. If they didn't do it at the school because they knew somebody at the school was going to screw it up, the fax machine wouldn't work and they would have changed the signature. So he accused like the lady, you go to these high schools, there's a woman there working the front thing, right? In the office. And I found those people to be highly, highly competent and credible. But he was accusing that woman of basically screwing the fax machine up so that New Keith Richardson would switch to Florida or something like that, or I don't know, wherever it was. And he and his coaching staff got banned from a high school. I mean, this was peak Lane. It's just so many Lane Kiffin things. I don't know if everyone remembers that one. So if he takes the job, first trip has got to be down. He did coach FAU, so I think he sorted it all out. He also said everyone in the town was too poor to own a shirt. That wasn't a good line. There was a lot going on back then.
It would be good for business for this podcast and many others in the content business if Lane went to Florida, because you go from a microphone to a megaphone in that state, but like it's just there's a difference. And God bless Lane, he still can't help himself, like there's just
and we love it, and we love him for it. I mean, he makes it entertaining, and he's got a tremendous team, man. I mean, that was a great performance on Saturday. And, I tell you, Kirby Smart had the best line, I think, about Georgia. This is not a vintage Georgia team. This is not the 21-22 team. And he said, we are hard to kill. Sort of like Jason Bourne. That Bourne's hard to kill. That's like the dogs. It's hard. It's hard to put them down, and they just kept fighting, and Lane's team played great. They've got another challenge this week. Who's next, Pete? I mean, I know I don't want to put us all, the three of us, in an unfair speculation, but we're also in the business where it's obvious. We touched a little bit on the people that are struggling right now. It seems crazy to bring up Mike Norvell given the recency of his undefeated regular season and ACC championship. Hugh Freeze is a lot like Dan brought up with Arkansas, with Auburn this year. Auburn keeps inventing ways to come up slightly short, in all of these games, and they're winless in the SEC. So who's next? Is anything imminent at this point?
I don't know if anything's imminent, Rece. It's such a week-to-week business now, maybe more than ever. But I do think there are conversations and consternation in both Tallahassee and in Auburn, Alabama. And sitting here at this moment on the trajectory they're on, Auburn's been terrible in SEC play under Freeze, and they're 0-4 this year. And again, I said it earlier, I don't think there's a better way to describe Mike Norvell's current conundrum than a 9-game ACC losing streak. Like I'd be curious how many, and we could have our stats ninja, Marissa Dowling, look this up for us. How many schools have been on 9-game ACC losing streaks in the last decade, right? That is really low. And at that place, that has, it's a 5-alarm fire. There's no other way to say it. That's just simply not acceptable. I mean, this is a place that was lobbying, fighting, and like browbeating the ACC to leave. And they've lost 9 games in a row, a conference they patronized, took to court, and now they're at the absolute bottom of it. And it is not that type of losing is not aligned with their clearly stated goals to leave this league. So let's just say it's fair to say there's some snickering around the other 16 corners of the ACC at Florida State, not necessarily at Norvell, who's generally liked and popular, but at their board, president, et cetera, for the product has not met the brashness of the administration during the legal drama that unfolded in the last
you can add
2
Clemson
years.
to that too. Clemson suit
Yes.
too. And since the lawsuit hasn't been going so well for the old plaintiffs.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. I will say Florida State was a more aggressive plaintiff than Clemson. Clemson just kind of like drafted and slipped in their coattails, and they did it with a little more Southern politeness. Florida State did it with all the subtlety of like a tomahawk chalk on, after an 80-yard Charlie Ward touchdown run. And yeah, this business, guys, is so fragile right now. Everything about it is so fragile. What you knew doesn't matter anymore. What it is right now has nothing to do with what it's been. It is an all-time inflection point for what is going to be. What we knew, like Dan said last week, the Dusty Heismans and stuff, what we knew matters, but it doesn't directly correlate to what is happening, right? Like I'm not trying to erase history here, but what we knew in the past does not show up on Saturdays. And in no other moment in the sport does one season have absolutely nothing to do with the next one. And look, I love it. I think it's an awesome moment. I think these are the glory days. And, I think having a Star Wars bar of college football playoff, which we're looking at now with some Georgia Techs and another Indiana and Virginia and all that stuff, I think that is awesome. As someone who's covered this sport for a long time and loves it.
Let me interject one thing.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
I understand what you guys mean. One season has nothing to do with the next. That's what separates being good from being elite. Because when you're elite, it does. There is some carryover from one season. Now, I'm not saying everybody, even Saban talked about at the height of his powers that you had a new team, you rebuilt it. I mean, Lou Holtz, who's over my shoulder here, told me for 10 years, you have a new team every week, let alone every year. So I'm not really talking about that, but I'm talking about the culture that's established. The elite ones do carry it from year to year, and that's on the coaches. And Dan, that's why people are looking for new coaches sometimes, because they're looking for the guy to carry that thread and develop some type of consistency and performance.
I think it's just really hard to do, though. I mean, and this is just to go back to these buyouts. Florida State had to keep Mike Norvell 2 years ago, right? So they threw massive amounts of money at. Now they're sitting there saying, "Boy, we'd like to fire the guy, but we owe him $58 million or something like that." And and every school is going to walk off the cliff, right? Like, who I'd like to be right now is I'd always like to be Marcus Freeman, because I'd like to be that handsome and that talented. But other than that, I'd like to be Marcus Freeman or his agent, because everyone's going to say, well, let's try to get Marcus Freeman. Marcus is sitting up there in South Bend winning games. Oh yeah, give me some more. I'd like to be this guy, right? Signetti didn't even have to negotiate. Took what, 36 hours? He got $93 million. Everyone's going to go off the cliff on it, and you don't know 2 years later. I don't know that you can be elite anymore. You can be better than the others. Schools can be better than the others. You can have some advantages, but you just can't you coach a team, not a program. You don't run a program anymore. It's important to do. Yeah, to some degree, but the portal, you cannot stack. Nick Saban went into a national championship game with 3 NFL quarterbacks as his 1, 2, 3. And when Jalen Hurts, who's won a Super Bowl, wasn't good enough in the middle of the game, he went to Tua. And he could have gone to, I guess, a young Mac Jones at that point or something like that. But you just aren't going to have that anymore. It's just so much harder to find the guy. And they're overpaying in chasing this. We're going to get the next Saban. We're going to next thing. Like, one of the most, I don't quite know how to say it, but courageous, reckless, bold moves of the past, I don't know how many years it's been now, but 15 years was when Georgia moved on from Mark Richt, right? Mark Richt's doing a great job. Terrific guy. The guys were getting in trouble. Everything's going well. And they said, we're good, but we can't get too great. And they went and hired Kirby Smart, who hadn't even had any head coaching experience. And boom, 2 national titles. It can work, and you can get a guy. But even Kirby, those teams aren't as good as they were a couple years ago. A couple of them are rolling, but I don't know. It's just tough out there for these coaches.
I think my point is not that. I mean, I agree with that, and I hope I've been clear about this. But my point is that there is continuity, because maybe the Kirby Smart teams aren't what they were, but they still have that DNA about them, that they play to a standard and they're harder to beat. I understand.
I would agree.
Nobody's arguing with your point about keeping players. I mean, the perfect example is, of all things, on the Notre Dame offensive line. For the second year in a row, they lost Ashton Craig mid-season, lost him earlier last year. They put in Pat Coogan last year, performed admirably, played for the rest of the year. Craig's hurt again this year. Hey, that'd be a good idea. Maybe we could go to that Coogan guy. Oh, no, he starts for Indiana now. So, I get that. Nobody's arguing that point. But I'm saying that if you have the right leadership and the right infrastructure, that there is some connective tissue that allows the program to be – the team is year to year. Heck, as Holt said, it's week to week. The program carries a little connective tissue of the leader if he is doing it as well as it can be done.
I would agree with that.
I almost think, guys, like we're talking about how dynasties are dead, and then we look at what Ohio State has done since that Michigan game last year. Blowout number 7 Tennessee, blowout number 1 Oregon, handle Texas, although that game came down to the goal line. I wouldn't call that a blowout. And then controlled the game against Notre Dame, still had to go win it at the end. So that's 4 top 10 wins in a row, which whoever wins the title is going to have to, basically do some version of that, maybe 3, depending on where you're seated. And then this year, I saw a stat the other day that they have given up the least amount of points through 7 games in the history of FBS football.
No first down touchdowns allowed. No touchdowns in the first half.
Yeah. Now, I mean, like
That's
where
crazy.
they are right now, is remarkable. And again, they have played 2 ranked teams, Texas and Illinois. Illinois scored 16 on them. Texas scored 7. But it is just, it's a tip of the cap to they are defying the gravities of this era right now at a high level. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you they're going to run unabated to the title, but I think they're in really good shape. Oregon's really talented. Indiana's very good. Whoever they meet they're going to have to go through another gauntlet, Big Ten title game and beyond there. Obviously, they still have to beat Michigan. That goes without saying. That will be a mental challenge, even though Michigan, I don't think, is what they were on the field. Especially, offense doesn't feel like they have a ton of weapons. But you go through the rest of the Ohio State schedule, and it's Penn State at Purdue, UCLA at home, Rutgers at home, and then they obviously go to Ann Arbor. Like if they're back-to-back
bigger threat than it should have been last year.
Yeah, no, that's very
Michigan's
fair.
a better offense than last year, but yeah, that's a mental. Julian Sayin is really good. I've said this a couple times on this. Like Ohio State's winning these games, they're boring. They are a boring team to watch because they just annihilate everyone, and it's hard to sit there when there's all these games going on to say, I'm going to watch a lot of Ohio State, but. Yes, he's got great. Tate has turned into just a monster player too. Like their wide receivers are great, but Julian Sayin is so accurate and so good, and he's a redshirt freshman or whatever his classification is. First year as a starter, he had transferred into Alabama after Nick Saban left. This kid is a terrific player. And I don't know that he's getting the attention maybe he deserves on it. And then the defense is it's like a game. It's like, hey, why don't you get to the red zone and then let's play, right? I used to cover a lot of MMA. My favorite guys were the Diaz brothers, and they started to bleed. And then they'd say, okay, now the fight's on. Nate Diaz would be like, okay, I'm bleeding. Okay, let's go. Fight's going now. Now we started. It's almost like that with Ohio State. Like, why don't you get close? Why don't you get close? And then we're just gonna take your soul. This defense is so good. Fantastic team. And I agree. This is the one program that I truly believe in. Maybe Alabama, they didn't have it last year. You can still do it, but I just think it's rare and it's hard. It's just hard. And again, they wanted to fire Ryan Day. If there wasn't an expanded playoff, Ryan Day's getting a chance. But that's kind of part why I love this playoff, and I love this size of playoff. Can I state that? Do we really need 4 automatic bids for the Big Ten? Have you seen that Michigan would be an automatic bid? Do we need this? No, we do not.
No.
Okay. This size playoff adds drama. The rest of the way, a whole bunch of teams can't lose again. The rest of the way, you're going to have those, oh my goodness, Miami lost. Are they out? Notre Dame can't lose. There's a lot of teams that cannot lose again. Ohio State can, Indiana, a few, but how many can Alabama lose? And so it is a gauntlet the rest of the way. This is the right size playoff for this era. And this is why please do not change the playoff. Please do not expand your conferences anymore. Please do not make some dramatic thing until we see how this whole sport works. Stop building the plane while it's flying. Let's see how we do and then decide. Rant over.
In terms
they're
of
going to expand the playoff.
Think about it. We're just past the midway point, and in terms of the conference races, Georgia Tech, SMU, Virginia, all unbeaten in conference play. None of them play each other, and Georgia Tech and Virginia don't play Miami. In the Big 12, BYU and Cincinnati, they're unbeaten, and they do play each other, but Cincinnati doesn't play Texas Tech or Arizona State, which, I think most would say are among the 2-3 best teams in that conference. Ohio State, their 3 remaining Big Ten opponents don't have a conference win. The other 2 or 3 of them, the other 2 are UCLA and Michigan that we've mentioned. After UCLA, Indiana's other Big Ten opponents have a combined 1 win in conference play. Notice I said after UCLA, which fired its coach because they didn't have any wins in conference or out of conference, and the only 2 unbeaten teams in the SEC at the moment in conference play, Texas A&M and Alabama, and they don't play in the regular season. So I echo Dan's point.
Realignment has been the problem. Conference realignment is the problem, not these court cases. They did this stuff to themselves.
Let's play this game, guys. Indulge my affinity for the carousel here. So if you fire Mike Norvell, and if you fire Hugh Freeze, and if Billy Napier is fired, and again, we have openings at Oklahoma State, UCLA, Penn State, Virginia Tech, Arkansas, among others, who do you hire at Florida State? Who do you hire at Auburn? Like, where are these coaches going to come from?
Can I tell you, not that I want to protect the person in my household. No one is calling for anyone's job. But if there happened to be an opening on the loveliest village on the plain, the Auburn aficionado in my house would prefer that James Franklin be hired.
James Franklin's going to go somewhere.
Franklin,
he's in the catbird seat right now.
Yeah, and that's to Penn State's advantage on this buyout. But you can also get him cheaper, right?
Yes. Oh, for sure. For like UCLA, which is dead broke. Rece, let me hijack this.
What about the skipper? The skipper and Gilligan Neuheisel, though, they have taken over. The skipper has done this.
Yeah, the skipper's doing great.
This 3-hour tour is back from the island.
Right back.
Yes.
In
no one has done better than this guy.
You spent 10 minutes on the set with James Franklin the other day. What were your impressions of him? That moment, him coming up there, I thought that was obviously, until the chaos of Saturday unfolded, one of the buzziest moments of the weekend. What was your impression of spending some time with James?
I thought that he was humble. It was one of the things he wanted to do because he is proud of what he accomplished, and he was very concerned prior to the interview about how that would be perceived. I thought he handled himself well. He faced the questions. He told the story about how it happened. And then at the end, I went back and said, well, basically, I don't remember exactly how I phrased it, but the record against top 10 opponents was cited as the reason for your dismissal. How will you approach that differently in the future? He knew, he's talked about that in the past. So I don't think it was any kind of surprise to him, that was brought up. But I thought he came off as confident, humbled a little bit, and still a little bit rattled, just to be honest about it. I think he's telling the truth despite all the noise and the chants. And, there's a story that at a hockey game, after the loss to Oregon, that they gave up a goal and they started chanting "Fire Franklin," before it happened. I think despite all of that, I don't think he really thought it was going to happen. And so I still perceive that he was a little bit rattled. But, some of that will go away with time. But I thought he handled himself very well and very confidently.
Yeah, you could tell it was still raw. I spoke to him in the office for a couple minutes, and somebody just walked up to him and said, "Hey, how are you doing?" And like, it was not a "Hey, I'm good. How are you?" Like when I walked into the coffee shop this morning to get it, and they were like, "Hey, how you doing?" Like it was like pause. Like there was a very human element there. Like this guy, and that goes like it was. You could tell he had gotten sideswiped, like wasn't expecting it to happen.
And I should point out the one thing too, Pete, and I've said this here, and I should have said it on the show Saturday. All of us serve at the pleasure of our employers. And even though you can differ with Pat Kraft's decision or the Penn State Power Brokers or the decision that they came to collectively, you can differ with that if you choose to. But it's a lot like, in a lot of ways, I think one of you guys, maybe Dan, one of you brought up Mark Richt. A lot like
Dan
that.
did,
It's a lot like that. I mean, there have been a lot of good. There have been near great, and they want great. So it's hard. I don't fault them for doing it, but I do. It's a risk. But I thought I don't think he saw it coming at all. I thought he handled himself well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Dan, what did you think watching at home?
Yeah, I mean, I thought what I liked is he showed up and was like, "I'm ready to go," and I thought that was a good message. It's tough anytime you lose your job, and we all can joke and hey, look, you got tons of money and you're not financially set, but when you get tapped on the shoulder like that, it anytime you've been through layoffs and you see colleagues lose their job and this or that. And so I thought it was good for James. I think, I'm interested to see how this goes as the sport goes forward. Because in the past, there was a time like, well, that guy's failed. He's got to go do something else for a couple years. And then maybe he gets a mid-major job. And it's kind of like the career's over. And I'm wondering in this era whether it's a little bit more like, the NBA is famous for we're retreading, right? Like, hey, Doc Rivers got another job, right? There's a good coach. Doug Moe. Larry Brown, I think, coached 9 NBA teams. Yeah, Cotton. And he's like, hey, we need a coach. Cotton Fitzsimmons. He'll get you 52 wins. I don't know. I mean, like,
good side out of bounds.
Doc Rivers has had at least 6 jobs, right? Great coach, but then sometimes it's no longer you failed, you're a failure, you're the worst. It's ran its course, right? Nobody, there's occasional Greg Popoviches, right? There's an occasional guy that stays forever. And then there's these other guys that are good, solid coaches, and you bring them in and maybe all the things align and you win the title, or maybe you don't. And maybe James Franklin's that guy. I think he's going to get a job because you're going to look around and say, who am I taking? And say, hey, this guy can run the program pretty well. And if we do this, maybe we can get, there's worse places to be than, I think Pete said it reasonably, like 7th best program in the country. That's not a bad spot. You may get frustrated eventually, but that's a good frustration. It's a lot better than we're being humiliated or we only won 2 games. So I think there's guys like that you'd say, Rece, you brought up Dan Mullen. Yeah, maybe you sit there and say, hey, look, okay, what was this? The rub on him at Florida was he wasn't that interested in recruiting at the maniacal levels that you need. And then maybe like Urban did, well, you don't have to recruit that way anymore. And it's different. And so, Deion Sanders puts together a team and he hadn't been at one high school in like 3 years. He doesn't visit anyone.
I'm not hard to find.
That would have been,
to find.
How, I'm like, come on, you come visit me. Right. Yeah. And now he's Deion and that works, I guess, but I'd still like to see him visit a couple high schools, but that's all right. In the past, you'd say, what? Like, that's impossible. Well, it could be done. So maybe that's where James Franklin is. I think he gets a good job and you don't know. He said, I'm going to win the title at the next place. Maybe you do.
Be interesting to see. And then, as we wrap this up, fellas, as you look at this over the past weekend, in the realignment, sort of along the lines of the realignment, if you look at the dumb loses more than smart wins, Washington State hired a really smart coach, Jimmy Rogers, had some success at South Dakota State, I believe, and they almost beat Ole Miss, have Virginia on the ropes for 3 quarters. Actually, they were in the game against Washington earlier this year, got outscored 28-0 in fourth quarter. And I like to find these things, a couple of things, and this dumb loses more than smart wins. They might have lost anyway. Washington State signaled for a fair catch on the kickoff after the game was tied. You say, well, what's the problem with that? You get the ball at the 25-yard line. Well, the problem was that someone who didn't catch the ball signaled for the fair catch. So when the person who caught the ball at the 2-yard line then took off running, no, plays over, it's dead right there. They got the safety. They end up losing the game.
So, hey, Rece, did you pick that game in your Superdog?
I did, but I got the cover, which is, you're getting 17 and a half points. But I will confess, with all going on, that was the reason. That was the reason. I think they were good, to be honest about it. Virginia had all the momentum in the world, and it felt like they were going to win anyway. You don't know that, though, but they certainly helped the chances out. And Dan, the other thing from the Saturday night fiascos, did you or did you not see the post from our friend Captain Andrew Luck after Stanford was triumphant.
I didn't. But please, I'd like to hear it.
Would you like to hear it?
I would.
In the aftermath, Captain Luck reported, "I am jubilant. Our unit was successful in defeating the Florida Tribe. What a magnificent moment for the men. Hard work, steadfast resolve, and of course, squirrel oil helped secure this victory. Please tell the Hogs about this simply marvelous news, Andrew."
That was a great win by them.
Yeah.
That was a great win by them.
That ending sequence was wild.
They tried to lose.
Gus Malzahn is not capable of coaching in normal games, and that game was not normal.
Squirrel oil against the team with a guy named Squirrel on their roster. That's the only explanation for how they
missed by the captain there. If they captured the squirrel, that would have been big.
That would have been big. Yeah, great work by the captain Andrew Luck. It was a lot of wild games, and it's it. These I didn't redo my point differentials, but it just seems like each week it's just everything's close. You don't know.
It's been amazing. It's why we love it. It's why Pete's family photos get rescheduled. We thank you for listening to the College Game Day Podcast. Download wherever you prefer to get your podcast, or better yet, subscribe and never miss a single episode.